The king was pregnant. Hi, I'm Michael Everts, and this is my channel, Fit to be Read. Today I will be reviewing Ursula Le Guin's classic novel, Hugo and Nebula award-winning novel, The Left Hand of Darkness. This book was written in 1969. We follow Genly I, a first mobile or envoy for the Ecumen. The Ecumen is a loose confederacy of inhabited worlds or planets. Member worlds of the Ecumen share ideas, innovations, technology, information. I wouldn't call it an alliance because I don't believe there's a military component to it. Genly is on a mission to establish relations with the world Gethin, known ecumenically also as Winter. Winter resembles its name as it's a very cold, icy, snowy planet. Genly's first interaction is with the nation of Karhide and the government official Therum Estervan. Estervan is sort of the prime minister figure there. I don't think they actually have a title of prime minister, but that's sort of his role. And he is Genly's primary and first government contact. Their relationship at first is rocky at best. Genly especially does not trust Estervan. They are from different worlds and different cultures. The largest contributing factor to this distrust is that Genly is pretty much thrown off by the unusual personality and characteristics of the Gethenians. And since Estervan is hard to read, he doesn't trust him. Contributing to the hard to relate to personality is the dynamic gender attributes of the Gethenians. Gethenians, well, let's just say the novel is known for the ambisexual, androgyny, intersex themes throughout. Gethenians exhibit one or both genders and can become fathers and or mothers. When Gethenians are in what's called Kemer, what we would call maybe being in heat is maybe the most close way to describe it. A temporary dominant gender presents when they mate, and this determines who will be the mother and who will be the father. This provokes some deep thoughts for the reader. Genly eventually is granted an audience with the king, but it doesn't go so well. The king's not really interested in joining this Ecumen, and he's also being influenced by another shady dealer in the government, this official known as Pemer Tibay. Tibay, also the king's cousin, is a sneaky character and undermines both Estervan and Genly pretty successfully. In fact, Estervan ends up being exiled from Karhide, and the exile is sort of a death sentence in so much as he has to leave Karhide or he's going to be killed. And they make it really hard for him to leave because they really just want to get rid of him. Tibay sees him as a political threat and needs to get him out of the picture. He wants him dead, and that's what enemies do. Estervan is lucky enough to escape to a neighboring nation called Orgarain. After Genly's audience with the king, which is not too successful, he leaves to try out his luck in Orgarain. He meets with the common cells who run Orgarain. That's how they refer to the government there. We find out that Orgarain is a nation steeped in inefficient and redundant bureaucracy. They meet with Genly and maybe give him or us some false hope or expectations. There's also some sneaky stuff going on there with different factions of the government. It gets tricky too, as one of the factions is this KGB type element, the SARF, that everyone is scared of, and we sense they are pulling some strings. The result of this is that Genly ends up in a prison farm, and he's incarcerated in some very bleak conditions. There's this like really awful ride to the farm that's just terrible. They just pick him up and they send him to prison. They don't want anything to do with him. Let's just get rid of this guy and lock him up. So who comes to his rescue but his old buddy, the disgraced Therum Estervan, the traitor of Karhide? The rest of the story really follows these two as they kind of form a bond in a friendship, journeying across the brutal landscape and the snow and the ice, and it's referred to as the Gobrind Ice, and it's an 80-day trek. It's really the heart of this story. So I'll now discuss my 5 likes and 5 dislikes for Left Hand of Darkness. I'll start by saying this book is fit to be read. My first like is that it takes only about 14 pages to really be pulled in and invested. The political intrigue has ramped up enough by this point, and the vivid texture of the Gathenians' personality is already becoming really clear in a really strong way. Early on, I almost questioned if LeGuin was playing with us a bit, dropping some wild vocabulary on us. Phlegmatic, obdurate, pertinacious, but employing those adjectives preceding the dialogue between Genli and Estraven, the character of the Gathenians is realized. It becomes clear, and she chose her words very carefully and wisely. The first thing I somewhat disliked with this book initially was the overreach with world building. Diving into the book, we are challenged right away and put off balance in a way that perhaps distracts from some of the early detail in the book. Considering the length of the book, the reader questions if it's not a bit indulgent. When every page has a new alien term for some behavior or different location, it can become a little bit complicated. I'll say it is a fun challenge in sci-fi, expecting these terms before fully comprehending them, but I also feel you need to have a longer book to have it all be relevant. Oddly, in the end, the heavy detail ends up being relevant and welcomed. Almost hypocritically now, this brings me to my next like, expanding on the world building and LeGuin introducing us to some compelling terms and inventive alien behavior. She goes for it. LeGuin is all in. It's completely warranted. Reading this partially as an account of an envoy's journal or a report or time in this new place, it makes sense that on an alien world, there's going to be a ton of new terms and ideas and behaviors that are ambiguous and foreign. Also, regarding the amount of detail, I will designate as my third like the sensation that in so few pages, I felt like I had read a 500-page book in a good way. The world of Winter and its 2 prime countries, Karhide and Orgarin, are very developed. The climate and the challenge of that climate are deeply discussed and painted on a very textured and clear canvas. The emotions and personalities of the main characters are explored in detail. The plot suffers a little from this, but the trade-off still enhances the enjoyment of the book. The book comes in a bit under 220 pages, but it is really, really rich in detail. For my second dislike, I want to reflect on how much is made of the androgyny and ambisexual or intersexed nature of the Gathenians and the expected intrigue it would add to the story. I found this to fail somewhat. The story is enriched and it provokes certainly some deep thought. Unfortunately, the pronouns he, him, his so dominate the text as to disengage the reader from the important complexity and the intriguing duality in gender examination. I see how revolutionary and maybe even taboo the subject matter may have been in the 1960s, but it reminds me of how many works of literature and film fail to appropriately capture woke ideas of gender and sexuality. I feel the story could have added deeper levels into this topic of gender. In this book, too often roles and behaviors are feminine or masculine, following stereotypes. This is just too simplistic and avoids a true deep dive. The film Alien immediately comes to mind as a more successful examination of, let's say, feminism in film. Sigourney Weaver plays Ripley, who is without a doubt the hero of the story, and who is a true leader and a feminist hero. She's not a strong hero because she's a woman pretending to be like a man or presenting traits generally classified as masculine. She simply exudes confidence, strength, fortitude. Everyone knows she is the leader. She's the one to go to. Everyone comes to her. And then a book that comes to mind, forgive me, is Ready Player One. Ready Player One is certainly not heavy, even by YA standards, but it creates a virtual world in its oasis that provokes deep thoughts about gender. Individuals in the oasis can choose to appear as their given gender or an opposite chosen gender. While it's presented only at a superficial level and somewhat immaturely maybe, the idea pops up enough times and in curious and diverse enough ways that the reader is provoked to think about how we view gender. I would argue more effectively than Left Hand of Darkness does. Regardless, it's not the strength of Left Hand of Darkness. The strength of this book is not the thing that I would suggest is most titillating or revolutionary about it. The thing that's most interesting about this story is Genly and Estraven's journey. It now at this point gets harder to reach for more dislikes. So dislike 3, kind of lame. I think it's just more of a missed opportunity. LeGuin introduces us to some interesting mysticism with abilities such as mind speak or mind speech, foretelling, and doth. The mind speak, which is basically telepathy, both Genly and Estraven have the ability. Though Estraven, like all Gathenians, are not aware of it. Nobody told them about it. No, they were never taught it, never developed naturally in them. But it is an interesting development in the relationship between Genly and Estraven, and Genly teaches Estraven about it. I think the really strong study of their relationship would have been more dynamic if we could have had a little more presence of mind speech and just seen where we could have gone with that. We're also educated about the foretellers who, through a sort of religious or mystical ceremony of sorts, will, for a price, answer almost any question about the future. The idea is certainly not new, even for 1969, but it's always fun to have to think about how to ask a question correctly or make a wish to get the real wish you want, but to answer a question in the right way to get the answer that you seek. For example, it would be a mistake to ask the question, when will I die? Because we can see how the foretellers may answer this with something along the lines of, you will die after John Smith dies. Well, that doesn't help me, right? Rather than giving you the actual date and time, which is probably what you're looking for if you're asking that question. Doth is also fun. It is this super strength that Gathenians can tap into. Doth is somewhat limited, and the coming down period following engaging of Doth can be pretty debilitating and put you out of commission for a while. Like number 4, the escape. In chapter 14, the escape to me is where the book really becomes a page turner. The relationship and trust developing between Genly and Estraven is a nice payoff. It definitely took a while to get there, but this really elevates the story from a good read to something really intriguing and potentially fascinating. Expanding on that, my 5th like then is when we get to the ice in chapter 18, titled The Ice. When I arrived at chapter 17 and it looked like it was going to be another one of these fable chapters that are interspersed throughout the book, or a distraction from the action, I thought, whoa, wrong place to blunt the momentum. I think the device works well in stories with cliffhangers or where the story is hard to put down. This story, though, has not bred enough captivating moments to excuse this chapter. The chapter, however, turns out to be barely more than a page, and my concern was completely unwarranted. That's not the like. The like is that the chapter that follows is brilliant. Whereas the cycling between Genly and Estraven furthering the story with their point of view chapters, This is the first chapter where their stories really overlap, and it illustrates their differing point of view using the same situation. Genly repeats Estraven's story about sexuality, Kemmer, love, and their deepening relationship, but from his perspective. This gets deep. Before this point in the book, I was really questioning how relevant the role of sexuality and gender was to the story. If it was as profound as I feel I was led to expect with this book and its reputation. The use of male pronouns, throwing it off, I could really for the first time feel and see the presence of male and female in Agathenian. I was also running into this feeling that while I was enjoying the book, I was quickly nearing the end of the story. I didn't know how much more I was going to get, right? There was really little room for a big payoff, excitement, or some sort of surprise to happen. While I was waiting to see what the big conclusion could be to satisfy this journey, this chapter is really now giving its payoff. There may be more to come, but this revelation and deep dive into the confusion of sexuality and friendship, understanding and misunderstanding, and love is definitely a reward or a payoff that I did not know to look for. A fourth dislike may be the somewhat of a short change with the setting in the nation of Karhide. While the book starts out in Karhide, we don't get to see a whole lot of like the climate and the atmosphere and the landscape there. Most of the action takes place in Orgarain. The initial Karhide story feels a little rushed, and we understand it much less than the well-realized Orgarain and the government of the commensals there. Final dislike number 5. The secondary or tertiary characters beyond the main two characters are very one-dimensional. This didn't really impact the story. I'm not too upset about it, but the story might have benefited if second-tier characters had more dimensions. If this had been indeed a longer book, I could see more room for this to happen. I could see the ruthless character of Pemmer Tibay being more fleshed out in his actions and backroom dealings, getting a little bit more scrutiny. There easily could have been an additional chapter spent with the foretellers. And I also think that the political intrigue could have been even more fascinating had we spent more time in Orgarain with reflection on the Sarf and their shady dealings. But there we have it. 5 likes, 5 dislikes. I certainly had to really reach to criticize this book 5 times. It is an excellent, thought-provoking, rewarding, and entertaining read. I have seen many top 10 sci-fi lists with Left Hand recognized as an all-time great and all-time favorite, and I cannot disagree with those rankings. My personal sci-fi top 10 may not list Left Hand of Darkness in the top 10, but it's definitely not far off. While I'm off to read more books, I very much appreciate and request you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and ring the notification bell. I believe I have a strong voice about science fiction, and I love talking about it, and I hope to reach as many people as possible to continue these discussions about these wonderful books that I'm reading. Thank you.